Please welcome to the stage Lauren Williams, Senior Editor for Defense One, Jennifer Swanson, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Data Engineering and Software at the U.S. Department of the Army, and Florent Groberg, Vice President of the Strategy and Optimization Group for AE Industrial Partners.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So I'll just jump right in. I want to leave enough time for questions, but the Army has been going through a digital and software transformation for a while now. It definitely started to pick up last year, culminating this year with Secretary Wormuth signing out the software directive. And then right after that, you guys kicked off an AI sprint of 100 days, and we're coming at the end of that 100 days. Can you tell me where you guys are with that and what you've learned so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of had an order for how we approach things, right? So software and data went in parallel, and they were first because those things are foundational to us being able to implement things like AI. So we feel like we're mature enough at this point to be able to really get some results out of the 100-day plan. So where are we right now? We have identified what all of the S&T investments are that we've made to date in AI technologies, and we're aligning those to gaps that we think exist. So I think the two big gaps that we have identified and we're really going to work to try to close between S&T, industry, other things are: how do we test AI? Because AI is not deterministic, so you're not always going to expect the same result back. When you put in A, you don't always get back B. And so being able to modify how we think about testing is important. And how do you secure AI? And so those are the two big things that we're really looking and trying to bucket some of the S&T investments that we've got. Do they fit these? There's other gaps, so those aren't like the only two, but really what's coming out of this is those two plus some others, and where we still have things that we need to continue to solve. We're looking at strategies for how do we approach AI with an ASALT. So what are we we don't want everybody to necessarily go do their own thing without some centralization, but we also don't want to over-centralize because that's not going to be effective. So what are the things that we are going to centralize, and what are the things that we're going to just distribute and, PMs are going to do on their own? And so some of that is going to come out of the 100-day plan that we will then deep dive more in the 500-day plan to really operationalize it. The big thing that I think I'm very excited about, Mr. Bang talked about it. He's several different engagements in the last few weeks about the defense, our layered risk framework, our layered defense AI framework that we're #DefendAI. So he's briefed kind of the top level, which really talks about basically, depending on what system I am, depending on what the consequence of attack of this algorithm would be based on where I am, what I'm doing, will determine really your risk level. And then what are the mitigations based on those risks? And how many controls do I have to apply to make sure that we're comfortable and that soldiers or users can trust the results of the algorithm? So he's briefed the top level. We've developed a lot more than that we're going to be releasing soon to industry for feedback. But we've identified like 32 different risks based on things that we've done in the 100-day plan. And part of it is also looking at similar frameworks that industry, MITRE, or others have built to see what makes sense to pull in. So 32 different risks and 66 different mitigations that would apply to those risks. So those are all things that we've generated and are outputs of the 100-day plan so far.
So I'm interested in your thoughts on this particular approach and how industry might be receptive to it or not.
Well, I think it makes sense, right? You get this 100-day approach and leading it to the next generation in terms of where they're going to take this type of technology. But what's important in this concept is the idea of bringing in industry as well into the whole I call it the proof of concept, MVP type of stage, because the Army is committed to this process. They're putting resources into it. They're putting budget into it. They got leadership making this a top priority. We, on a commercial side, we understand where they're trying to go, and we need to make sure that we invest in the correct lanes to support them. In essence, we need to be walking hand in hand together. I think that we need to move faster. You would agree with that. There's obviously multiple reasons as to why you can't move as fast as you want, because we have to do it ethically. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit later. But there are so many organizations out there, so many smaller companies or companies who are doing some incredible work in the space, and they need an opportunity potentially at times to come in and understand what their outcomes are for the Army, what desired, so that they can potentially inject some of their technologies or expertise into it. But it's hard. There's so many doing a lot of good work. And this is when, companies like mine come in and we try to identify, understanding where you're trying to go. This is exactly what you talked about, and figuring out who we can potentially bring into the mix to really energize this mission.
I want to pick up on the thread earlier when you mentioned about the involvement with ASALT and centralizing AI, but there are different types of AI. And we all know that. Like, you have generative AI, there's analytics, and they're going to go, it's everything from just enterprise platforms that, you're using at your computer. And then you have what's going into weapons platforms, like the next generation combat vehicle. I'd like to replace the Bradley with the AI and the targeting system. Can you talk about how you plan on making AI more ubiquitous?
Yeah. So let's talk about the centralization part first. I by no means mean we're going to have like a central place where we're developing all of that AI. AI is that we're going to absolutely have some bespoke needs and capabilities, and the PMs are going to be able to get after that. We're going to require some things like, for example, our layered defense AI framework that we're developing. We're developing that for use by our PMs to make sure that as we develop AI capabilities, that we understand the risks and we're putting in the proper mitigation. So we want to make sure that there's some, requirements that are levied across anybody that's building algorithms so that we are able to trust the data and trust the information that we get out of it. Like you said, so generative AI, right? That's a thing today. I mean, that's out there. Not as much for the government though, because we are worried about our data. And I think that's probably true everywhere, right? So I think, you might use ChatGPT on your phone to help you do something offline, but we certainly right now don't have it on our, IL5, IL6 environments because we're worried about the data. We are, I will be kicking off a Gen AI pilot this summer with ASALT with a tool that does have an ATO for IL5. And so we're going to be able to really, I'm excited about that because I think it's going to be a huge productivity booster. And I think it's also going to give us a kind of a view of how can we use Gen AI, not just back office, but also is there value for some of our business systems, right? What are the other use cases, and really try to kind of develop what can we do with that. So the pilot's not just about increasing our productivity, which will be great, but also what are the other things that we can do? And then what are the other industry tools that are out there that we might be able to leverage or add on? As far as, for say, our vehicles or, our weapon systems, there's more work to do. Like I would say right now, we want to make sure, because the risk is so high, the consequence is so high of having that information, that we need a little bit more, I think, reps and sets with our defense framework and making sure that we understand what mitigations to apply before we're ready to, put that at the pointy spear. But we're certainly moving very quickly. So the 500-day plan that will start later this summer is really aimed at that part. right? So 100-day plan is setting the conditions, where are we at? And then the 500-day plan is really about operationalizing it so that we're ready for POM 26 and out to really be able to implement.
So I want to go back. Gen AI pilot, are you saying that you're going to be testing using ChatGPT to write contracts and requirements?
I did not say ChatGPT.
Or can you just say more about what that means?
I'm not ready to necessarily put out, it's not ChatGPT.
Okay.
It's an LLM that's developed by somebody else. And it's really more than an LLM. And I don't think we are going to necessarily out of the gate write contracts with it. But I think in the area of contracts and in the area of policy, I think there's a huge return on investment for us. And so the pilot is going to be, it's us, so DASA Desk combined with DASA Procurement and DASA SAR, who does the policy piece for ASALT, to really try to build out some use cases and figure out what can we do. So might it one day be able to write a contract? I hope so. But we gotta pilot and test and make sure everybody's comfortable with it first.
And I can see that being helpful because there's like a dearth of contract officers and professionals. So I know that that's a challenge. Flo, I want you to jump in here and then please talk about the ethical implications.
I'll be honest. It sounds nice. It's great.
Yeah.
We just got it. The hardest part is getting those contracts done and getting the funds dispersed once you identify where you want to go. There's so many. It really is a landscape of government contracting today that makes it a little bit difficult at times to move at the speed that we require or want to. You're going to hear this from industry all the time. And, that's something that we need to look at in terms of policy as well to make sure that we don't get behind. Look, reality is when it comes down to AI and machine learning, we need to make sure that we also understand the distinction and differences between AI and machine learning. I feel like we overuse the word AI when it's actually the majority of everything that we're doing today is machine learning. But the adversaries are moving incredibly fast. So we talked about, we had this conversation with your team prior, which is, there's this crawl, walk, run process. Well, in this case, there's no time for us to crawl. We need to jump in at the minimum walking pace, work with industry, identify once something that makes sense for you, especially as you go through this 100 and then 500 day process, that we move a little bit faster. So how do we do that? It's scary because when we talk about AI today, there's a lot of unknowns. And so to me, it's really understanding the framework of what you want to accomplish, put some boundaries there, and then go do it and make sure that's the requirement out there. And so keeping a human in the loop when it comes down to weaponization of any type of AI platforms is critical for us to go out and be able to deploy these type of technologies and products into the hands of the warfighters, which they need today. So that's a process, that's a requirement. And so with industry understanding that, when they build, they understand I need to build with this capability, with these requirements and restrictions and barriers, but I also need to push it a little bit. And then we have to get it in the hands of folks. What drives me a little bit insane at times when I'm in this space, because I want to provide the warfighter with the right equipment and decision makers with the ability to make decisions faster, more efficiently, and safer, is the fact that it potentially takes 3 to 4 years in the process. And this is not an Army problem. This is something an industry, a government, because industry is just as much as fault as as anyone else in this space. But we need to really focus on that so that your team and those folks who are doing incredible work, when they identify something that makes sense for us, you're able to move on it fast.
Yeah. So can I just pull a string on one thing that you said?
Yeah.
So agree 100%. And I think if you kind of look at the landscape over the last couple of years of the things that we've done and the things that we've achieved, I think we're moving really, really fast. In AI in particular, though, we started with industry a year ago, asking, how do you test? How do you secure? And we really, I'm going to say it was concerning what we got back. And this is across the space. It's not just defense, it's commercial as well. I think there is, obviously, industry needs to make money. This is a very ripe space to do that right now. So I think there's a tremendous amount of competition to get the thing out.
Yeah.
the thing is not ready for military use right now. And so that's really what prompted our need to do this 100-day and 500-day plan. Is we kind of have to slow down to speed up, so that when humans in the loop, absolutely, but whatever you're having that human decide has to be based on reality.
Absolutely.
And right now, as you know, if you talk to ChatGPT, it could tell you all kinds of nonsense. And so it's just making sure that we're able to weed through that, so that we're not setting up our soldiers for bad things. But moving fast is critical, and that's what we're trying to do.
And also the probably some of the difficulties behind this is in the environment that this technology needs to operate in, specifically when we're talking about classified. And then that's when adds a ton of time, because you can't. Yeah, it'd be beautiful if you could take commercial product and deploy it right there now, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? 6, 7 specifically. You can't do that, right? You just, there's parameters, there's requirements, there's policies, there's compliance, there's security measures and things like that. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. And this is something that's incredibly important for our national security.
Absolutely. 100%. That's our Project Linchpin program is going to try to get after those types of things. And that coupled with the defense layered AI framework that we put together, the purpose of that is to be able to take third-party algorithms in from industry, because we don't want to develop all our own stuff. You guys are going to do that way better than we are. So be able to take that, but put it through the testing and the security rigor to be comfortable that we don't have poison data, we don't have, garbage data, we don't have, bad things happening.
I agree.
One of the things that I think is interesting when you're talking about taking these algorithms is the notion that they're disposable in a way. So like you buy it from a company and then, you'll do things to it and then it's useless or it just goes away. Like, can you talk about how industry should kind of get their heads around that particular concept? Because it's not a fixed thing. You're not buying a chip per se. You're buying a math problem.
I think you're buying a service.
Yeah.
And I think the service is the fixed thing. I think our needs will evolve. I think we will have algorithms that stick around for a very, very long time, because if the need doesn't change and it's working, we'll continue to tweak it and improve it, but we're not just going to throw it out. But I think we'll have things that are very bespoke that we need for, right now and maybe not again tomorrow. But I think what you're really buying is the service. And what Project Linchpin is setting up is a secure pipeline that effectively provides the tools, but also the architecture to be able to plug and play models and algorithms in and out. It's kind of MOSA for AI. And so that's going to be very important so that we're able to keep what we need, evolve what we want to evolve, and then replace what we need to replace.
And then how are you considering intellectual property concerns? I know that's a really big thing for smaller companies that are, just trying to break into the space. And so I want you to speak to that as well in terms of what the concerns are there.
So from our standpoint, the way we look at this, and I don't think it's unique to AI, I think it's software, I think it's kind of everything, is we want to provide, and we're working to provide, the architecture for you to plug in your black box. So we don't really, we get the IP concerns, and we're not trying to steal anybody's IP. We're not trying to reinvent what you guys have spent your R&D creating. But we do, there's a couple of things that we do want. We want to be able to replace it with the next better whatever, algorithm, widget, box, whatever, because that's what our soldiers deserve. So we don't want vendor lock. And that's partly what's driving us to develop these frameworks so that we're able to plug things in and then replace them. And in the case of AI, we want enough visibility into the inside, not the recipe, not to reverse engineer, but enough visibility to be able to be comfortable that we understand that the output is going to be accurate. And we got to work that, right? So, I mean, that's part of what we're doing in the 100 and 500 day plan is what does that mean? What I just said exactly. So that we're able to really come to some agreement with industry on protect your IP. We need you guys to keep that. But give us the insight that we need so that we're not concerned about security.
I think, I've never really been too worried personally. Maybe I'm in the wrong with the government taking the IP from a company. I think the government is more inclined to identify the right type of technologies and products and services to come in to help them with their mission and have those organizations support them along the way, right? I think you're more worried about, are you going to be there to answer the phone when things go wrong with the thing you just sold me and you told me it's going to work versus, we're going to take your IP and then just copy it and say goodbye. Mm-hmm. Where you're going to see this sort of concern is more on the peer-to-peer interactions and the partnerships inside of industry, which is, is concerning at times, obviously. And this is why companies should protect themselves. You patent your technology. You read your contracts. You hire the right lawyers, right? You protect your IP because you've heard the horror stories. Unfortunately, at times, you've seen really good opportunities in terms of technology with the idea of partnerships between 2 or 3 different organizations not materialize because of this whole IP concern. And that can actually potentially delay partnerships with the U.S. government to push a certain type of technology that is technically ready, right, into the hands of your teams. So that's where I'm seeing really more of the concerns out there. I agree with that concern. If you build something, you need to protect it. But there are patterns and ways to go do that. And I think you really see it more alongside a small organization, smaller teams, smaller companies with a big brother or big sister company that comes in. And that's where that fear comes in. They're like, hey, they got a lot more money, a lot more lawyers. And I'm afraid that if I do partner with them, they're going to just swallow me, take my IP and then sell it to the government. And so, there's ways around that. And in our work, the work that we do, specifically in the companies that we invest in, we are very cognizant of that and we support them. And we work with our small businesses who have really incredible technologies that support the mission. And we partner with the big brothers and big sisters out there in the community, but we do it the right way. So there's a way forward at all times, but I completely understand that risk because it's happened. And that's usually companies that fail to protect themselves. And, unfortunately, at times it's a pretty severe lesson learned.
I want to stick with you, and because I'm curious to understand or see, what are you seeing that you think the Army needs right now, but they don't have, or there's barriers to getting it to soldiers on the battlefield?
Well, to me, the one thing that we're looking at, obviously, we have multiple different theses. So we're going to counter UAS is a big one that we want to support the Army and we want to support the other branches around with having a lot of conversations across the industry with some really incredible companies who are doing some really good work. We're looking on a global scale as well. But one thing that keeps me up at night, and my wife could tell you all about that, and she's frustrated at dinner tables sometimes I talk about this, it's the supply chain. Mm-hmm. It's the manufacturing and supply chain. I think we can all attest that we have a lot of work to do there to secure it, to make it more efficient. And so when it comes down to SaaS companies and technologies that can really help other groups in manufacturing be more efficient, to be able to provide on time, at scale, with quality, at the right affordable price, with efficiency, the type of products that our customers need, our government needs, is really, really important. And we're seeing that that's a problem out there. So we're looking at the types of software companies. We're looking at the type of companies who are making an impact in that space, really specifically in manufacturing. When I go outside the Army, Navy, I'm looking at submarines and shipbuilding. Right? Massive requirement out there. We have a big focus on space as well when it comes out to rockets. And we have a company called Firefly builds rockets. We have another company called Allspace that is building antennas. And one of the things that we talk about is great technology, great concept, but if I can't get the parts in time with the right quality, how am I going to produce them correctly? And so we are looking at ways through software to be able to be more efficient and provide that type of solution out there.
Awesome. Jennifer, how are you accounting for these sort of supply chain challenges in this 100 and 500 day plan?
Yeah, so we are looking at S-bombs, right? Which we're all, I think, pretty familiar with, a software bomb. And I think we'll be able to talk very soon about exactly what we're going to do with that. I'm not quite prepared to do that today, but how does that apply to AI? And so you've heard Mr. Bang probably mention data bombs, right? How do we know? We want to make sure the fidelity of the data that we are using to train our algorithms, that we understand what that is. And so we're looking at what are the things that we can do to be able to establish those requirements for data that's training algorithms. And we've talked about, and I'm not going to say the word, but we've talked about taking that the next level, and I kind of touched on it earlier. How do I get visibility into algorithms without making industry nervous about you're giving up your IP? And I really appreciate what you said, because you're right. The government's not going to take your IP. We're not in that business, right? I hope you can trust us not to do that. It's company to company where I understand that that's a problem, and yeah. I get that, and that makes complete sense. But just being able to kind of continue to evolve that relationship with industry so that we have the visibility into the AI algorithms and really that transparency that we need, that I mentioned earlier, to be able to be comfortable that it is secure. And what does that look like? Is it a baseball card that gives us some stats, for example, on things that went into that? Those are all things that we're working on right now that will come out of the 500-day plan.
I'm going to turn it over to questions in just a few minutes, but before I do that, I want to look to the future a bit and see. I mean, we've talked about the 500-day plan, so that's over a year away. But can you talk about what the Army is focused on with respect to AI in the next 6 to 18 months? What can we expect to see? Are there RFIs, RFPs coming out? Any more pilots? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely see some RFIs. Project Linchpin has already put out some stuff, right? And so I think you're going to see that continue for sure. I talked about the LLM pilot that we're going to be starting next summer. This summer. Did I say next summer? Nope, July. So depending on what comes out of that, there may be more to follow there as we expand that. I think potentially, and this is really speculation because I think we want to see where all of this goes, but I think that our newer business systems are probably the right place in my mind to start trying some real AI to see what we can do with it, with, I think, more guardrails, right? And so just to kind of build the confidence that, yes, we know how to do, our security framework is working, our testing is working. And so we don't have any specific plans for that, but we are looking at systems in terms of where there is, a little bit less risk or more comfort to try those things out.
Yeah, I think we're looking at, I mentioned the county OAS piece, but also more on the software side of the house of the county OAS. I think there's quite a bit of products out there in terms of the framework of an aircraft. Mm-hmm. But really, you look at both sides. You look at open architecture, third-party integration. What type of AI platforms are going to come in and really play a very specific role to solve what the Army is asking for and those requirements? So we're looking at that. The other piece is data security. As you really brought that up, it's something that to me is, as AI continues to grow, as we continue to invest in these cloud platforms, and we are, really storing our information, our data into the cloud, which is very secure. I used to work on Microsoft, so full disclosure, I'm a big Azure fan, but the other cloud platforms are outstanding as well. It's going to be really getting the government and all those platforms connected into one group. So connecting all sensors into one platform and connecting the data pieces to go through a centralized play that's secured. How do we play a role in that? How do we support that? What are we seeing in this space? So who is working on what? And what we're lucky at AE with is that we have a buyout side of the house, private equity side, but we also have venture fund. Mm-hmm. And so we get to dabble into what these brilliant folks are in the industry are thinking of, dreaming of, and investing in. And then we get to go invest as well and play in that space and learn and take that and make sure that, we're part of that solution as we go forward.
Awesome. I want to turn to the audience for questions.
Hi, Chip Block, the Chief Solutions Architect at Evolver. Have you looked at the ownership, control, and classification of AI-generated data? And is it the person who queried it? Is it the platform? Or is it the context of the data?
That's a fantastic question. And I would tell you, I don't know. So I don't think that we've really done a deep dive into how all of that will work. I have to assume to an extent, if we own the AI tool, that it will be our data, that, we own it. But I would think we probably have to talk to some legal folks and IP folks and other folks to make sure, because I think that's a really good question.
Any other questions? No.
Yeah, my understanding when you're looking at an LLM, the hardest piece is actually tracking what it did. So, if you have no record of what it did, but you know how it was trained, then you can't see how precise it is. You can only risk assess it. What's your approach to that with the things that you're piloting and working on now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the LLM that we're going to be able to use to pilot is going to it's going to give us citations. So that one of the things that we did that I didn't mention as part of the 100-day plan is we developed and got signed a generative AI policy for ASALT that requires a human in the loop right now because you don't know what you're getting. And so having the citations will be very helpful in terms of being able to fact check it. And then we really need to play with it. We're going to train it with our own data. So that's another big advantage, that since it's going to be operating in an IL5 environment, we can put our CUI data in. And so we have the data, so we know what we're putting in and be able to make sure that, all of that aligns. But we have a lot of learning to do. So I'm excited. I think it'll be fun. And I will keep all of you updated as we go.
On that Gen AI policy, how is bias being accounted for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Basically, we're requiring ethical, responsible use. So, bias is hard because sometimes people are biased, right? So it's one of those very, I think, fuzzy things that requires oversight and critical thinking and human, involvement to make sure that we're not just letting the tool run wild.
Yeah, I mean, she's absolutely right. But it's getting closer.
Yeah.
It's getting really, really close. You talk about, ChatGPT. You brought that up, and ChatGPT today versus ChatGPT 6 months ago is completely different.
Yeah.
And they're all battling each other to come up with a bigger, better product. And so, ChatGPT is in Copilot. So it is included in there. And now you go on Google, you have, their version, Gemini, I believe it's called, in there. So but it's learning at an incredibly rapid rate, which is the key in terms to ethical, that we need to make sure that, the policies and the guardrails are put in place. But the bias is getting pretty good.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for all of these tools is data. Like, I just don't think there's enough data on the planet right now. And then, certainly copyright rules, and like you're seeing all of these cases play out. It's really interesting to me because I think it's just such a new space that we're going to set a lot of ground rules as we go here.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah.
That's perfect, right? Just jump in. What do you talk about future, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot about. How do you think quantum is going to change AI when it becomes a little bit more mainstream?
I think quantum is going to give us certainly the more compute power than we have now. So I think there's basic limitations to what we can do with AI today. How much compute we have, how much power we have, right? I mean, it's a tremendous power hog. I think quantum will certainly be able to help with the compute piece and the security piece. And so it's definitely a very interesting space. In fact, I just had a couple of vendors in my office last week talking about their quantum capabilities, and we're very interested in that.
I think it's probably one of the most important aspects of when you talked about AI, because it is a race right now for quantum. And I'm not talking about a race between commercial companies here in the United States. It's a race between nations.
Absolutely.
Quantum. This reminds me of a race to the moon to an extent, but with a lot more implications on the way we live our lives today. Because you said it best. You talk about security. When quantum is going to change the whole game's, the landscape in the game, it goes down to security. Soon, really soon. I get really excited about quantum because I think about instantaneous calculations. Zeros and ones don't matter anymore. So if you're a Star Wars fan, remember all those flights and those folks, this is a question I had first time I watched Star Wars. I'm like, man, where's the FAA? Right? How are all these cars moving and stuff? Talking about quantum is going to be able to do instantaneous AI, will be able to do instantaneous calculations. So calculate as you're about to hit, make a decision, and then guide the direction of that vehicle in a different space. I think about the medical space too, but security, that is something that is going to be very, very different. So I think our lives are going to be very different maybe 5 to 7 years from now.
Totally agree. Quantum's moving really fast. I think, though, it's also very expensive still. And so I think we'll need to figure out like what really has to be quantum and what can we afford to just use regular stuff for.
I totally agree with that.
But yeah, it is very exciting.
We have time for maybe one or two more. I see you in the middle.
Yes, hi there. I just have a question about the LM you're developing now. Do you think it's going to be used to help to filter proposals, specifically when you're like in a conflict zone? Right. I used to be a subcontract associate, during the Iraq War in 2005, and we used to get so many proposals, and that was when they could barely speak English. I mean, it wasn't the native language. Now they have access to AI, so I would expect for new conflicts that the people on the ground, are going to be flooded with new proposals and such. So an LLM that could maybe filter some of those so that people have time to, award the contracts and get the goods and services they need without a bottleneck would be paramount. Is that something that you're working on?
So we haven't even started the pilot. So, contracting is one of the first areas we're going to delve into because there's definitely a lot of efficiency that we can gain. One of the things, though, with contracts, especially for digital stuff, which is really kind of my area of expertise that we're driving, and you see it in the software directive and you see it really across ASALT, we don't want 100-page proposals anymore. We want much shorter written proposals. We want demos. We want orals, like show us you can do it. And that's not something AI is going to be able to really help us with. So I think there might be some efficiency to be gained, but to me, the biggest thing is going away from these monolithic, huge proposals that we're not really able to assess well, and then we get into a contract that doesn't deliver. So it's just kind of a little bit of a different approach that we're taking. But sure, I mean, one day we may be able to get to that in contracting.
Yeah, Mike coming.
Yeah, since you are managing or overseeing the three very important elements, data, engineering, and software, my question is from your viewpoint and from your department's viewpoint, what is the biggest challenge in next 10 years? I mean, which of those items, data, engineering, or software, where should we focus most of our resource to basically mitigate the issues that definitely will have major impact in USA as well as in international because of the superpower race?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think they're really related, so I'm going to have a hard time picking one for you. Software is how we're going to evolve capabilities on the fly. So, when you look at the software directive, it's really about how we're changing internal Army processes to enable industry to really develop in a CI/CD model. And without that, we're not able to evolve capabilities like when we show up on the battlefield and our adversary has something we weren't planning on. We need to be able to evolve that quickly through software. So that's very high priority. Data, can't do it without data, right? Data centricity is really our approach, and we've embraced it. We developed a unified data reference architecture. We're looking for UDRA compliant or conformant solutions that we can bring into the architecture so that we can really equip our soldiers with the data that they need when they need it. And by the way, also for AI. I think digital engineering, which we didn't really talk about, is a space that is newer. And, the under just signed a directive out recently in May to really set the stage and the foundation for the Army on digital engineering implementation. I think that's a space that needs investment from all of us, because there's certainly IP is a huge issue for digital engineering right now, more company to company.
Yeah.
And so how do we get after solving those types of things? How do we get our people upskilled to be able to do all of the things that I'm talking about? So it's hard for me to pick. I'm sorry. I know that's what your question was, but I think they're all really, really critical.
We are out of time, but I want to give the panelists a chance for final thoughts before we head out.
Look, for me, one thing that I learned in my time working in the government, military, or in the Army, Boeing, Microsoft, LinkedIn, is it's a communications game, folks. And so a lot of us have really great technologies and we have really good concepts and good strategies if we really want to go out there. But one thing that I brought to Microsoft before I came to AE was the idea of working in engineering, of hiring operators. And I'm talking about folks that know nothing about zeros and ones in the engineering side, and mixing them in with digital engineers, with software engineers, with data scientists, so that when we go out there and we try to explain to the customer, to the government, what we're trying to do, one, we understand the environment, we understand their mission, we speak the language, and then we can explain it better in terms of how this type of technology is going to support what the requirements are, which number one priority is always listen to the customer first. And so when we look at companies in our investments, companies like Edge Autonomy or Big Bear AI, that's why we invest in these groups, because that's the mindset that they have. They're committed to the mission. They're deploying the resources. They're hiring the right people. And then our job is simple, is to get in there and provide them with added extra value. Obviously capital, but also expertise. We have people like General McConville, who's part of our group, as an advisor and an operating partner, making sure that these folks in these groups build right the first time. So partners, teammates, just like everything we've learned in life are really integral to the success of your mission, but also to the right partnerships for government.
So from my standpoint, I think the Army is very serious about digital transformation. I think, when you look at what's happened in the last couple of years within ASOL, for example, my office didn't exist. It was set up last May when I got there, and Mr. Bush brought me in, our AAE, because he saw the gap and he saw the criticality of being able to help our programs to digitally transform as we modernize. And so that's really across the space. I mean, our CIO, that's, there less than a year now, is also doing the same things writ large for the Army. And so this isn't going to change. Like all of the things that we're putting into place, we're trying to codify in directives and policies and writing so that, it outlives whoever. People come and go, but, we want to make sure that these things are foundational. And our partnership with industry is critical. So certainly out of my office, and I would say that's true probably for most of our PEOs and PMs and the CIO and everybody, is we are communicating with you guys. We're letting you know what we're thinking. We're getting your feedback. We're adapting the products based on that feedback, because we can't do it without you. So I certainly don't want to be the one that puts out stuff that is not achievable, and industry's like, yeah, well, that's nice. It's good that it's a policy, but it's not doable. So everything that we're doing is very focused on implementation. You guys know how to reach us. If there are things that I'm meeting with industry all the time, very interested in products, capabilities, services, and most interested in any concerns that you might have about things that you're seeing come out. So, just please use that line to make sure that we're as informed as we can be.
Thank you both so much for doing this and for being here. I'm going to pass this off to Patrick.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.